Well, I guess we'll see. The proof is in the pudding, John. So in a year's time, I guess all these waiting lists will be gone. Everyone who's on the sickness benefit will be back to work with, great renewed vim and vigour. We'll see, won't we?
Well, I think actually, I mean, you say that slightly flippantly, but I do think that...
I say it hopefully, actually, but I do appreciate that sounded flippantly, but I do say it hopefully. The junior doctors clearly have some kind of case to make about the fact that pay has not kept pace with inflation, but a 22% pay rise. Now, ultimately, these people go on to earn huge amounts of money, six-figure salaries, and crucially, they have gold-plated pensions paid for by the public. And those gold-plated pensions are inflation-proof and guaranteed for life. That is a pension that hardly anybody in the private sector has the luxury of in this day and age. It just doesn't happen. So, to choose to give those people 22% on the day when you take £200 off millions of pensioners who will struggle this winter to pay their bills, I think that shows where her political instincts lie. And it is certainly to do with the power of the unions and Labour's instincts. They could have chosen to reform welfare to save some money. We have a ballooning sickness bill. That wasn't even mentioned. Instead, they went for pensioners.
Do you not think, though, we're on the public sector pay, there is a price if they didn't sort out these problems, though? And if you did end up in a situation where the strikes were going on and carried on, and NHS waiting lists continued to go up, and then you ended up with more people unable to get the healthcare they needed, there is a kind of... That leads to many other impacts. Then you end up with the problem that there are loads of people out of work because they're not well enough to work because they can't get the healthcare to work. That you do need to sometimes make these difficult decisions because, there is a massive cost if you don't do that. And something like the teachers, I can't remember what the figures were in the back of that publication they had yesterday. There were these figures on all the number, I think it was like 25 million school days had been lost because of strikes in schools. And that isn't just an impact on kids' learning, and particularly kids from disadvantaged backgrounds who are always the people who kind of suffer the most in these instances. It's also the case that parents have to take time off work, and then you end up with there's a cost to the economy, which is cost in pounds. And so they did need to find a sensible way to settle these pay issues with workers across the public sector, else you would just get the strikes carrying on. And, some of the people who would pay the price for that would be older people who wouldn't be able to get an appointment at the hospital or the GP. Well,
what signal does this send? Essentially, you hold the government to ransom, and they will give you 22%. So if you're a nurse now, what are you thinking next time round there's a pay settlement? Actually, the doctors got 22%. The doctors are on better pay than us. They have bigger career trajectories than us, so they've got the massive potential to earn a lot of money later down their career, which the nurses don't. So, shouldn't they get 22%? And then you have train drivers who seem to go off on strike at the drop of a hat. What are they thinking next time around? Oh, the government will give in. And so I think the signal here is that actually this is a government that will give in to the unions and hand out money to stop them striking. But ultimately, you have to remember here, pensioners are on fixed incomes. They can't go and earn more money. If you're in your late 70s, early 80s, and you are on a fixed income, you've got no ability to earn money elsewhere. And that's always been the reason that pensions have to be protected in a way that other areas don't. And actually, why would you take money off people who do not have that ability when you could tackle things like welfare? It just wasn't even mentioned yesterday. I don't understand why your priority would be taking money off people who have no ability to earn extra when you could save money in areas where people can earn extra money.
But what would you specifically suggest on welfare? What's the specific ideas? Just slash it across the board?
You have to do something to tackle the balloon in sickness pay. I mean, the number of people making new claims after the pandemic compared to before, it was more than double. And that's not sustainable. Those figures are not sustainable. But where is the will to address this? I've not heard anything from the new government about what they're going to do about this.
But that is why you do need to take steps like making sure people can get healthcare. And there is another cost on top if you don't give people pay increases. Then the NHS, we already know that there's loads of places in the NHS who are struggling to find the staff they need to provide services. If you don't offer competitive pay, then you lose your workers, which means then you have to kind of spend money to recruit new people. You have to kind of go and search them. And also you've got the issue that you have to start bringing in agency staff to plug the gaps, which obviously costs way more money. So does it make sense to kind of pay NHS workers who are on staff a bit more in the first place rather than spending all that money on agency workers?
Well, I guess we'll see. The proof is in the pudding, John. So in a year's time, I guess all these waiting lists will be gone. Everyone who's on sickness benefit will be back to work with, great renewed vim and vigour. We'll see, won't we?
Well, I think actually, I mean, you say that slightly flippantly, but I do think that...
I say it hopefully, actually, but I do appreciate that sounded flippantly, but I do say it hopefully.
I mean, the new government, they do realise that they think that people would judge them on two main things: cost of living and the NHS. And so they do need to, particularly on NHS waiting lists, if they do end up in this situation that is dragged on for, I mean, how many years have we been talking about different strikes in the NHS in different forms? They just know that if they don't deal with this now, that is just going to drag on, and there's going to be no hope of them bringing down those waiting lists. That they've clearly made a decision that the only way you deal with this issue is by taking quite decisive action now to just kind of get on with it.
Yeah, I think, and clearly they will be judged on those things, but they're also absolutely, definitely hoping that people will have short memories and they will have forgotten what they've done to pensioners in 5 years' time. I'm not sure that will be the case. There's a lot of anger out there already. These things were only announced yesterday, and there is a huge amount of anger amongst older people for the way they've been treated. I think they feel like they were misled during the general election campaign. There was no mention in that campaign of ditching the social care cap. There was no mention that the winter fuel allowance would even be a factor if they needed to find money to save, which clearly, the state of the public finances, I think it's probably best we don't go into that, because you can argue backwards and forwards about who was right and wrong about that. But everybody knew that there was a kind of big spending squeeze to come, and that's no surprise, but nobody in Labour suggested at any point that the winter fuel allowance would be part of that.